Deacon Patrick, and welcome to our date night series for credofamily.org. This is One Flesh, and we'll be exploring what does it mean to be one flesh? How do we live as husband and wife, called by God to be one flesh? Ephesians 5:31 quotes Genesis 2:24. And so we have a good idea here that this is very core to the sacrament of marriage, because St. Paul is quoting thousands of years previous the priests who, the Jewish priests who wrote Genesis. And it says, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother, and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." Each of us is created, God's breath into our clay, and we're body and soul, one being. The sacrament of marriage is the only sacrament that existed before the fall. And it joins two beings into one flesh. Let's take a look at some of what that means, and we're going to do that by looking at what Ephesians 5:21 says. We're called as husband and wife to be mutually subordinate to Christ in each other. This gets opened up subsequently in passages that a lot of people aren't sure what to do with, and the next video will explore more. For now, we're just focusing on what does this mutually look like to reveal Christ to each other. And the road to Emmaus from Luke 24:13 through 35 does an amazing job of revealing to us what does it mean to reveal Christ to each other as one flesh, husband and wife. On the road to Emmaus, which I'll be summarizing here rather than reading directly from the scripture, and you have the scripture reference previously, it's Luke 24. You have two disciples. They've been following Jesus there since some point in his ministry. And he's crucified and been buried for 3 days. It's the third day. It's Easter Sunday. He's risen, but they haven't paid attention. They've heard that he's risen. The women told him he was risen. But fear that the world that we're fallen into made them blind. Sin makes us deaf, blind, dumb, and stupid to being able to recognize Christ. Fear, while not a sin, is the excuse for all sin. So we always fall for sin, believing it's possible the serpent was right in the Garden of Eden. So fear made me do it. This happens in each of us, as husband, as wife. Now we have in our beloved spouse somebody who shares our life with us, who intimately knows us, and they know how to share the journey with us. And that's what Jesus is doing on the road to Emmaus. Jesus meets these two disciples fleeing from Christ, for whom they're deeply hungry. He meets them on the road. Our beloved spouse reveals Christ to us in ways we may not be so deaf, blind, dumb, and stupid to, but sometimes it's really hard and we don't recognize that in them. That's what happens to these two disciples. They're blind to Jesus. We need to choose humility. We need to be humble to hearing Jesus in our beloved. And that's a capital B, our beloved spouse. Share the journey. So Jesus walks with us and tells us, oh, how foolish you are. After hearing how we're doing, hearing our story, Jesus says clearly to us, You're deaf, blind, dumb, and stupid. Oh, how foolish you are. That's the challenge Jesus gives us. That's the challenge our spouse gives us. Can we choose to be humble enough to hear Christ in them, urging us to see him where we're blind to him? Prepare me to hear and see Jesus. Our spouse shares the journey with us and reveals the truth to us, but we don't always put the pieces together. That's what Jesus does by sharing the journey and saying, let me open up Scripture for you so you can see it anew. The same facts that the fallen world keeps limited reveal God's amazing love for us when we see with the eyes of Christ. So prepare me. Open my heart that I might receive the gifts you've already given me, Jesus, through my spouse. Reveal to me in the breaking of the bread the amazing, wild truth of how do we share this journey together? It's through the sacraments. And this is why it's so critical that as husband and wife, we do the life of the church together. Weekly Mass is an obligation, not because the church wants to impose rules and burdens, but because the Mass is the food, it's the source and the summit of how we go through the trials and tribulations of daily life in between each Mass. How do we be fed so that we can reveal Christ to the world, but by receiving Christ ourselves? And so we're sinners. Husband and wife both, striving to reveal Christ to each other where we're deaf, blind, dumb, and stupid, intersecting, seeing the world differently with amazing gifts we each have, and blinders that don't always intersect, but sometimes do. It's through humble obedience to Christ in the church and Christ in our beloved that we can get it in two. We get a new chance. We have the sacrament of reconciliation because God knows we will fall and we won't see. We'll be deaf, blind, dumb, and stupid. But God gives us in marriage a beloved to share the journey with us toward Christ, running arm in arm towards Christ. Next up is bold, humble obedience, where we explore, as I mentioned, the rest of Ephesians 5, those sticky wickets people aren't sure what to do with, of wives be obedient to your husbands, and husbands love your wives as Christ loves the church. Where does that come from? Why do we have it, and why is it so essential for us, for our salvation? Evangelization starts with you. Please share this video with 3 friends, ideally married, since this is about date nights and marriage, and share your story of Jesus in your life. Deepen your love with Jesus so much that that story simply bubbles up. And come and visit me and other videos and other opportunities on credofamily.org. May God startle you with joy.